Hello, brand new audience. Welcome to episode 1 of the StartupStage podcast. I'm Brian Castle, your host. And with me today is a good friend and an even better professional executive and entrepreneur. I'm proud for you to meet Shay Prosser. Hi, Shay.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. My son led the walkout for the teams at Charlotte FC's match this weekend. I got to send you the footage from that. So I'm a few feet above the ground still. Was your long weekend great?
It's good. And I sent both of my girls on 2-week adventures. They're both off at camps. And so it's very quiet around here. So normally I'd say somebody might be coming in and out or, a dog, but the dog's the only child here now. So excited to get to talk to you and focus on all of our wonderful people at StartupStage.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, you got the empty nest for a week or two, and here you are podcasting. So congratulations.
It's the weird thing about entrepreneurs and people that, love the business they're in is that you think, oh gosh, everyone's away. I get to work on my business. I get to work extra, working at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night is actually, kind of a fun treat rather than a drudgery. But again, we're all talking to founders, right? You do
That's
it
right.
because you're kind of crazy.
That's right. You're a founder. I'm a founder, and we're very passionate about serving founders. And it's hard for me to switch it off. Like that's a good point. Like mainly because I don't want to.
Well, entrepreneurship and insanity, it's a real fine line there. It's the people who are like, you know what I'd rather do? I'd rather throw caution to the wind and do something that's interesting and it's going to make me grow and learn and be challenged, but, in different ways. So, yeah, you don't really want to turn it off.
No. So I want you to share, one of the reasons I had you on, in addition to loving you, is you're one of the fractionals, as I call them, like I am at Startup Stage. And we'll talk a little bit how our work kind of overlaps in some areas where we work with founders and how we get plugged in together or separately as the business needs mandate, as we collaborate with our fellow fractionals in evaluating founders' needs as they're scaling. Kind of walk us through your professional journey. I know you've had a career marked by corporate achievement at some of the biggest names in business like Microsoft. I also know this isn't your first rodeo
Mhm.
as an entrepreneur, but kind of walk us through how you've gotten to this point and accumulated so much wisdom.
It's been a journey. I think my parents knew what they were doing when they said you could take your college money and start a business if you want. And, at that time it was not as popular. And I didn't do that because I had no idea what business I was going to start. And quite frankly, I wanted to play for a little bit. Right. So went and got a degree. But, after college, I've worked for every size of company and started my own organizations. So I've got a little bit of, time at all different sizes of organizations. So I've seen what happens. I was at Microsoft when Microsoft was not the behemoth that it is now. I think I was around, we were around 20,000 employees when I was there. So saw that entrepreneurial venture, sat behind Bill Gates at some events while they were bringing the next version of Office out, but was able to see that it is messy, right? Even then, I was in the field marketing there and ran large scale events, ran 3,000 person product launches across the Southeast. So really, I think our business skills we build, right? I tell young marketers and young entrepreneurs that it's not linear. You don't start out as a field marketing, generalist and then work your way up. You can, but there's also ways to grab different experiences. I went from Microsoft to about a 200 person channel partner, still in the technology space. And we had a zero marketing budget. Like by zero, I mean, every dollar that we had, including, the money from my own salary, came from doing channel marketing partnerships. So that was a lesson in how to budget well and how to be very, very efficient with the money. So then I shifted and went into personal finance and was a financial advisor and started my own financial education business. So that was a lesson in starting up, right? I had a business partner. Those kind of things just build in your ability to see around corners for people and help bring in people. They also get you really grounded in what you do well and what other people do well. Like what I love, bantering back and forth with you and looking at what your team does is that you have a depth of communications and content expertise that I can't touch. Don't want to touch it because I don't need to, because that's what you do really well. I can help lead parts of that and build on your expertise, which also is really what I find so exciting about this kind of group of fractional experts.
From that kind of walk through your experience, I picked up on a few themes that kind of drove you as a corporate professional and business owner, and probably translate pretty well into what you're doing now in your practice as a fractional expert for hire for founding teams. Things like how to operate in an extremely frugal situation, how to allocate when you're not, like still being judicious about how you spend your money for maximum ROI, kind of an intense view of how companies are resourced and when leadership teams can be in or out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
So you've learned a lot along the way. As you think about that, if you had to distill it into 3, 4, 5 focus areas or pieces of advice you'd have for entrepreneurs looking to scale, what would those be?
Simplify. I mean, I think people make things very complicated, and the more complicated, the more confused your team gets. And your team, you might have a very small team, or you might have, vendors and partners you're working with. Whatever that team looks like, the more you can simplify what you need to do. So strategic direction and clarity would be, the businessy way of saying it. But I would say simplify, know what you need to do to put one foot in front of the other. I was talking to an entrepreneur recently. They're at a stage where they're probably a couple $1 million organization, probably 20 people. And, they're like, we're going to grow this brand, this marketing. And I'm like, what do you need to do to double your business over the next year? And they go, well, we need about 20 new clients. I'm like, so you and your team need to make phone calls, reach the people that you need. We can do a bigger marketing strategy. Absolutely. That's a piece of it. But the putting one foot in front of the other today and tomorrow is do that outreach, get these conversations started. So I think also people put perfection before they put doing the thing. One of my things about marketing, and I think you and I align on this, we've talked about it before, is that 80% of marketing in my mind is getting it out the door. Because I have seen more beautiful marketing pieces that are sitting on a server somewhere being reworked or, recopy edited. And I'm not saying that I'm an enemy of we all want to put out A+ work. But if you're going to wait and do the A+ work and never get it out the door or not get it out the door in a timely manner, you might have missed an opportunity that B work would have gotten you. So again, it's understanding when the work needs to be A+ level and absolutely going and doing that. But also knowing that when timeliness and efficiency and doing the things are most important. So prioritization and simplification probably be two of my things.
Yeah, it's really wise, and I say that not from on high how I advise people. My own experience, creatives are idea generators by nature, and we can, and a lot of I view a lot of entrepreneurs as creatives.
Yeah.
They're just not in copywriting or design or things that animation, the things my agency does, but they're creating solutions and thinking about the world differently, kind of like the pure creative would.
So I've found that technical people can be some of the most difficult because there is a right and wrong answer in their book. So I worked with one founder, and God bless him, love him, great person, but was not able to get the relationships off of his plate. As much as I would tell him, I'd say, hey, You need to give that over to the salesperson. And he'd go, well, the salesperson isn't going to do it right. And I said, but the salesperson's going to go do it because you're not going to make the call. You're not going to actually get it done. So I think sometimes when people are highly technical,
Yeah.
they can get in their own way, just like creatives can. We all can get in our own way, right? Like,
Yeah.
but creatives can get in the like one more idea, and the technical people and go, well, I'm not going to get it out until it's perfect. And either way, wherever you fall on that spectrum, I think it's helpful to have professionals around you that can say, hey, Brian, I'm going to challenge you on that. Or, hey, Shay, I'm going to challenge you that you just need to get it out the door. Or to say, hey, this really does have to be perfect. And here's why it needs to be perfect. So don't send it out the door. So I think that's a piece of getting the right people around you
Yeah.
that can challenge your assumptions or balance you in other ways.
Yeah. And there's always kind of these factors that create a creative tension, like timelines, budgets, and the good, better, best, perfecter version,
Mm-hmm.
what people are striving for. And I, when I switched careers 16 years ago, I came from a finance background. And one of the things I learned from my very first client, I was handling his social media and blogs, and he's a corporate attorney. And I asked him, why did you start your own firm? And he said, well, I said, you walked out of the biggest firm in North Carolina. And the guy that referred me to you told me you were on track to be president of that firm one day. He said, entrepreneurs are scaling their companies. They're operating in a space where the speed of opportunity and risk is like the speed of light. And he said, I wanted to create my own thing to meet that opportunity and threat with the perfect level of responsiveness. And he said, I felt like that old law model didn't do that. It took days for me to like get to messages and things, and
Yeah,
my clients were missing opportunities. And he said, I had to leave that framework, start my own. And
I love
that's
that.
with me. My first client taught me that. And so I've operated one of the things, how we operationalize our work with founders. Rachel, our producer, can tell you this is a very common conversation we have, especially when we're bringing people in new. We will ask you to drop what you're working on in favor of work that's got a quicker deadline so that we can always say yes
Mm-hmm.
to and help our founders meet that speed of opportunity and risk. But they need to know they can always turn to their partners, and
Mm-hmm.
we never fail that. So far, we haven't.
I
Um,
love that because it's understanding that business is dynamic and that, you've got to be clear and prioritizing. I used to, at my last CMO role, that was a full-time role. I had a wonderful relationship with my CFO, loved her, but she was also understood it was a very dynamic market, right? So if things, we would do three versions of a budget and they weren't like super complicated. Each year we would do three versions of a budget so that she and I would know, hey, if we have more success, if our success is even greater, then let's have the pie in the sky budget of what are we going to do? What are we going to invest in? Not random things we're doing, but like, what are we going to invest more in because we have more? Hey, if we are on a different track, or things aren't growing as quickly, then hey, where are we gonna scale back some, and what are the things that are not going to hurt the business as much? So really looking at the dynamics and understanding the different pieces of business, and not just going, I loved that she wasn't a CFO who just said, here's your marketing budget and this is what it is. And then 6 months into the year, if we're going gangbusters, you know, I want to know where my budget is got some more room. Or, it's just I think the market's much more dynamic and we need to teach people to have better conversations and be willing to challenge our own assumptions too and go, I don't know. The market's so dynamic. Let's go learn together. How are we going to figure this out together?
I've had the pleasure of working for the last decade and a half with a truly elite strategist who's worked at top 10 global pharmaceutical companies as like head of strategy, things like that. And he told me years ago, and this also stuck in my head. He said, what I typically do, he said, they hire me to think about the next 3 to 5 years. And he said,
Yeah.
we typically come up with we workshop it and we come up with 4 potential scenarios. And then at the end, I tell them, none of these will be true.
Yeah.
You're going to land somewhere with a mishmash
He's
of
speaking to
all
my heart. He's speaking my language.
of
I mean, do you remember back in the day that I'm gonna date, date both of our, timelines when people did 10-year plans? I mean,
Yeah,
things have changed. And
yeah,
so I would totally agree with him. If you're making a plan beyond 3 years, you're wasting your time. Have the right direction, but make sure that you're looking at the couple year plan. Beyond 3 to 5 years, it's just something else is going to come out like an iPhone, like AI, something that's going to completely change those, but still have a direction. It doesn't mean that you can just fly by the seat of your pants all day long. So the balance has shifted to look at what's, 2 to 4 or 5 years out and kind of make some ideas, but then look at what your team's doing in that, 0 to 12 or 24-month time period and make some smart decisions there.
All right, Shay, let's drill down on your latest venture, North 12 Partners, which sees you leading a fractional C suite consulting business, not too far unlike what you're doing at StartupStage. Talk about your perfect fit. What's your unique value proposition, you think, for founders? And I hope you'll get into all the things you influence
Yeah.
along the way, such as ops, sales and marketing, finance, and business strategy.
Absolutely, Brian. So what I love is coming alongside an entrepreneur and, a business leader as they're really looking at what the business looks like. So I've described it a couple ways. One of which is, you got a great partner riding shotgun with you. You're still driving the car, but I'm going to be there guiding and helping you. Um, so one of the things I'm gonna go on that analogy a little bit, and there's a reason the company's called North 12, is that I think North is really positive. We like to go north, right? Your true north. And I do think there's about 12 things that people need to know and do in business. I'm not going to go through all of them, but talk a lot about, scalability and clarity. So knowing who your customer is, knowing what problem you're solving, getting a brand together, getting the customer service together, getting the model together. Those are the things that I really ride shotgun with business leaders on. So where that falls into how you and I work together is often there's 3 huge things around, the marketing, branding, getting that marketing strategy and getting some of that operationalized. So you have to have the right people on your team to do that. So what I help with is aligning the sales and marketing outcomes that we're looking for so that then we can work and say, hey, what do we need Brian and the team at Park Life to do to support the business direction we're going in? So I'll go one deeper on that analogy of like, if we don't know whether we're going to New York or to San Francisco, well, you and I both currently are in Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, it's a very different, it's a hard pivot. If you think you're going to New York, but then somebody says, hey, we're going to go to San Francisco, you're like, well, I'm halfway up 95 and I can't figure out the way to get going west. So I help them get that direction and then bring in people like you.
I love that. I love how you've kind of mentally packaged that with the 12. I'd been meaning to ask you in other conversations what that was all about. And when you started saying a minute ago, I thought, yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs may need a 12-step program.
I
But,
call it a 12-point roadmap, but I'll call it. But yeah, the 12-point roadmap, really looks at where they are and where they want to be.
well, what it really does, from what I'm picking up from what you're putting down, is keeping that cart behind the horse. We've had, I can't tell you how many clients, and this is at once both cute and not cool.
Mhm.
how they're obsessed with like a visual brand.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You and I
And
both. Yeah.
usually they come to me, I need a logo. And so when I start asking questions, because in order for our team to do justice, what are we talking about?
Who are we talking to?
Yeah. And I've met people who were in accelerators who still had not refined a concept yet, who were still pre-revenue, who were still a lot of things. And they were still trying to figure it out. And they're talking to me about a logo.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's cute and,
Yeah.
and neat that people are as passionate as I am. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I love it that they're passionate about the suit, the jersey they're going to put
Yeah.
on. But there's got to be some reflection on what you're trying to solve and how you're going to do it, and some pro forma about how that's going to perform based on some kind of data. To me, the best kind of data is somebody buying your stuff.
Yeah.
And so, walk us through a little bit of that. What are some of the other kind of milestones or markers that you see businesses kind of missing from time to time? And really, what we're talking about here is in their excitement to get to other things, right? Isn't that what usually drives
Yeah.
it?
Well, I think it's excitement. And then there's, it's around that. I mean, it all goes back to the strategic clarity and direction. But the thing is that people can have a beautiful brand, but if you don't know what that brand is supposed to be saying or to whom they're saying it, that's you're screaming into the void, right? So, I mean, I love a beautiful brand. I think it's important. I think your visual identity is very important. But, I'll get people who will say things like, well, we've got to be on social. Okay, totally. I can understand that as a concept. Why? Who are we talking to? And they go, oh, well, we just got to be on social. Okay, well, but what audience? Because then we got to there's a lot of social media, if you're trying to reach business owners on Instagram, good luck. Are they spending their time there? They might be,
Right.
but where are they spending, really looking at it? So I think that, the points are around looking at mission, vision, values. But I tell people, we're not going to do an 85-page deck on your mission, vision, values. We're going to get them out and do you know what they are? Why do you exist? There's a reason that we talk about mission, vision, values. If you don't know what problem you're solving, why you exist, then that doesn't serve you or your customers well, because you can't tell them what the problem is you're going to solve. And then you can't direct your team that's going to build that beautiful brand that's going to shout to the world from the rooftop. Well, they need to know what they're shouting and to whom they're shouting. So, and then it also, one of the points in the roadmap is innovation. Well, you got to know what you're doing to know where you can innovate. And innovation isn't always something huge. We all look at things like Uber was a great innovation on the taxi cab. All Uber did was change the way that we order a taxi cab. All they did. And it's been amazing innovation. I use it all the time and I love it. But you have to know what your core foundation is, and what
Right.
problem you solve to innovate on it.
Yeah. Value proposition. And if you haven't arrived at that,
Mhm.
again, with some kind of data to drive these things, why are you making choices about what jersey to wear or
Yeah.
what channels to be in or anything else? I like to, I'm all the time trying to tinker with how I talk about what we do
Mhm.
in ways that I hate when I'm talking to people like us who trade in like mystery.
Yeah.
Like they want what they do
Yeah.
to be as mysterious as possible so they can add zeros to the bill. Well, beware, because I'm lurking around the corner like that meme,
Yeah.
waiting for you to act like that way. So in my conversation with them, I can demystify everything you just mystified.
Yeah.
I'm all the time trying to come up with ways to better communicate the value of what we do. And so I'm thinking brand creation,
Mhm.
brand building, and demand generation.
Yeah.
If I had to say what are like three big buckets or less that it all flows into.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Because
Yeah.
if you don't, I'll change it.
No, I like it. I think really looking at, the brand and the brand building, but I think you talked about data, and I think that data can get a bad name, and people get, again, I think people overcomplicate it because they can go, "Oh, we need this big data." You might need market research, you might need studies because that can be really, really valuable. But also data can be going and knocking on the doors or knocking on the doors virtually of the target market. It could be
Right.
talking to others that serve that same market. Did a project for one of my clients where we really took her top 10 clients that we really want to replicate, and I did interviews with each of the CEOs. What we found was not shocking, but we found certain very perfect pieces that shaped the way we did the next version of the product, and it was incredibly valuable. The data that we got was, we thought we were solving this problem, we were solving that problem, but there was an adjacent problem that we were solving for them that we didn't notice and value as highly as they did. That what they were paying for was that adjacent problem. So it was interesting, but that's the data that informs what the brand looks like, what the brand feels like, and how we're communicating it.
And that's often the case with, I mean, there are truly great products that do one thing well, like quench your thirst.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other things, particularly in the world of like SaaS companies, tech companies. Like if you ask 10 people what they use LinkedIn for,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to get at least 5 to 7 answers.
Yeah. Yep.
And whether it's I want to be searchable for employers, or I want to network with people, or I want to, do proactive sales outreach,
Mm-hmm.
or I want to create a community for my brand since it's a B2B brand. See, I just rattled off a few without even thinking about it.
But the worst is the ones who say they have no idea, but that they post. And it's not meaning that that's terrible. It's just more know what, because then those are the ones who are unfortunately not getting the return on it because they didn't know what they were trying to do anyway. So they didn't know
Yes,
what they were trying to build. Are they trying to build thought leadership? Are they trying to build something? Or are they just posting?
right. And that leads me back to what you said, screaming into the void. I always picture that painting of the
Yeah.
guy going,
Okay. Yeah. The scream, the word munch, and
all right, Shay, we're going to wrap up with a neat feature that may or may not stick, depending on who else I interview on these things. You're going to flip the script on me and ask me a question about my approach. So take it away.
when the interviewee becomes the interviewer. I love it, Brian. So, I'd love to hear. We talked a little bit about, when people have strategic clarity and direction, and, but I want to hear kind of how you and your team work with people when they've got an idea,
Yeah.
but maybe not quite enough. So talk about how you work with them.
Yeah. So just this year, we've probably helped 10, 15 different entrepreneurs with an idea that came to us to help launch their business effectively from a marketing standpoint. Where I love to start with people, and usually they need our help in both of these aspects. Sometimes they've done a little pre work that's heavily influential because they're just wired for greatness like that. But let's talk normal people who are just great in their domains. We like to start with what I kind of call foundational services, and that can be around of kind of brand messaging foundations, like we were talking about, vision, mission, values, your distinct value proposition, an elevator pitch, at least half a dozen talking points that you would have for different stakeholders. So like if you're a B2B SaaS company, what are those, what some people might call an ideal customer profile? What does that stakeholder persona look like? And how are you speaking directly to them in ways that you'd modify with everybody else? Are you a nonprofit that has people you benefit, board members, volunteers, the media, as far as representing what the community thinks of you? How are you talking to those different people? And then, of course, getting into the visual side where you've got your primary, secondary logo marks, your typography, color palette, all the things that encompass a visual brand identity. And when you walk through those methodologies, and my core skills copywriting, so I'm going hardcore messaging. Got people like Rachel here that are asking questions kind of around figuring out how to pull that visual brand out of the ether. You can identify real strengths and weaknesses and gaps and opportunities just in doing those exercises the right way. And it's and just having a comprehensive conversation or two. And I'm happy to say most of our clients really have it together and have really thought through these things.
Mm-hmm.
And we're mainly just helping them with the core of what we do to reach those strategic endpoints and reach those people in their audience. But there are times where they're telling me an ideal customer profile, but I'm helping them identify one, two, or three more.
I love that. I've often heard marketing can be a canary in the coal mine. If you can't articulate these things, it could also, let's go with that analogy. It can be a songbird. It can be like you're singing it loud for all to hear. Yes, that is an elf reference, um, but the idea being, what you're doing is really pushing on that entrepreneur to be clear so that they can be clear with their audience. So walk me through kind of how I'm envisioning pushing on them, just asking them the next question. Talk to me a little bit about how you work with entrepreneurs and help them get to that clarity.
Yeah, it's kind of instead of me asking them very direct questions, it's kind of getting into their why. And I'll tell you that I'll go ahead and tease our next guest. I'm recording with her later today. Her name's Ellen Murphy, founder of a company called Sona, which is disrupting the sonogram space.
Ooh, I want to listen to that
And
one.
when I heard her why, her dad started a medical device company, and she spent a lot of time in OB offices, clinics, and she's a mom. She saw the firsthand how the pivotal role that ultrasounds can play, both in kind of the joy of pregnancy and oftentimes in some of the obstacles and pitfalls that expectant families face. And she came up with, I laugh when people call things revolutionary, but she's pretty darn disruptive. And she's the first major disruption in that space in about 40 years.
I love having had two children. I would love to see some of that space disrupted.
Right. And she's got this amazing perspective with her different stakeholder or audience groups, whether it's healthcare professionals wanting to optimize their practice with this breakthrough technology that hasn't happened in 40 freaking years, or the sonographer that has that intimate relationship with the families, with the expectant moms, especially. Also, like the people who run the practices, the value of like that competitive edge. A lot of times now
Yeah.
with consolidation in healthcare, it ain't the docs running the practice.
A well-defined value proposition, then you're right, gets you to those other unique audiences because you're allowed to think about the business differently.
So, Shay, thank you for creating so many problems today. Problems like how in the heck are we going to edit this into the shorter podcast I had in mind to begin with, or as I'm wont to do, just saying, screw it, we'll go with a little longer. This is good stuff. It's always fun to talk to you. And I think what this tells me most is we'll have to do a part two electric boogaloo.
Well, that sounds like
Yeah.
fun. As we get more entrepreneurs with problems to solve, we're going to have more stories together, and looking forward to seeing how we can build some wonderful businesses.
That's the best part for me and why this stuff just never gets old.
One more yes means one more person gets the help they need and the brand they need and get the word out there. So that's awesome.